You're here before me. Hi, Emily. Hi, Patty. Liz, you made me laugh. Hi, Brenda. Hi, Roberta. Oh, you gave me a laugh today. Let's see. Hey, Shirley. Well, what better way to start class than with a crown on my head? I can deal with that. You're so cute. We'll start in a second. I hope you're all painting with me. Okay. Well, you did. Let's see. We'll turn the camera so that you are straight. Let's see. Oh, I love you all. I'm going to take you all home with me. Hi, Marie. FYI, they're my own nails, just so y'all know. All right. Hi, Peggy. All right, so we're going to start. I think that's what I need, wine. I don't drink, though. Just an FYI for anybody that's new. First, thank you all for being here with me. Second, type your questions, type your comments. I will try to answer as many as I can. I usually do pretty good. If I had palette paper, it would help. If I don't, type it again because then I missed it. But I will go in after class and I will write the answers so that you have them also after class without having to... Did you hear all that? So you don't have to listen to the whole entire video. Okay? That was all my surfaces falling. Okay. So, let's start. Happy St. Patrick's Day almost. So, let me just say, when I designed this, I wanted something winter, but I wanted something St. Patrick's Day. My background, I did in 2 colors. I put on the prep that you could do any colors, but I'm going to quickly show you how I do it. And we should just pick up something that fell. This will be one less thing to clean up. Okay. So I had my piece base coated in baby blue. Here's a good one. I took a big brush, and I do this with my backgrounds a lot. If these colors are very close, so it's not a big change, but I'll add some white so that you can really see it. I take my brush, it's damp, I pick up my base coat color, which in this case is baby blue, and X's. See how there's an X there? But I do it very quickly. I'm Xing. I wipe out, I pick up my next color, and I'm Xing right into it. And I'll do white so you can really see it. Now, you see how I have these lines? I'm just going to very lightly, almost tickle it. And I'm going to blend those colors. And you see how I don't have very distinct, so I'm not coming in and doing this. So I don't have these very distinct lines here. And my hand's all the way back on my brush handle. And I'm very quick. It's almost a very messy, but it's a beautiful, beautiful background. Okay. And then if you get too white, add some blue. Okay. I use a crappy brush or a crackle brush. Okay, so that's how I did my background. When, and this is so anybody who's new, I'll show you how to transfer a pattern. I'm making a mess tonight, aren't I? Okay, so I took my line drawing. It's on tracing paper. I will line up my piece wherever I want it. So in this case, say right here. Make sure I'm on screen. This is graphite paper. It looks like carbon paper. It is not carbon paper. If I put carbon paper down and I did this, it would be all over. And it's really hard to erase. So I line my pattern up wherever I want it. I lift, I slide it under, and then I'll just come in with anything. I'm using a stylus, but you can use a pencil, anything, because it works on pressure. And there would be my pattern. Okay? Now when you base coat, you'll also have, hey Patty, you'll also have areas like this was black. So the good thing about having it on tracing paper is I just line it where I want. And in this case it's on black, so I'll use white graphite. Always shiny side down. So here's the dull side, here's the shiny side. And I'll put it under. And if you needed this line, we'll put this here and this here, just so you can see. Okay, that's how you put your patterns on the black. It's the same thing. This is the dull side, this is the shiny side. If you're not sure, take a piece of scrap paper, and here I'll do it backwards first. And just do this, and nothing comes out, and then just do this. So then you'll know this way between the surface and the line drawing. Okay, you all ready to paint? I am ready to paint. Okay. So I'm so glad you're all here with me tonight. Thank you. Okay. So, when you have a penguin, he's kind of a little bit fuzzy. So we're here. We're going to take a little bit of black. You can take a deer foot. And I try to keep this out of the way so you don't get confused. You need little bits of paint. You don't need a lot of paint. So take a deer foot. On a deer foot, you use it dry. Okay, don't add water to the brush. If you do, it's very, very clumpy. It's shaped like the hoof of a deer foot. The long end is the toe, the shorter end is the heel, just like a deer foot would be. Okay? We're going to put a teeny tiny bit of paint right on the toe, and a little teeny tiny bit. So I know you can't see it well, but here, if I do this, you can see how little bit. Okay? Very, very, very light pressure. My brush is straight up and down, and I'm just going to come in and I'm just going to fuzz that edge. You see that? And it's the edge between the white and the black. Don't worry about getting it on the black because it's already black. It's the same color. So it doesn't matter. Okay. I'm just going to come in and I'm straight up and down. And I'm here. And you see how I'm just fuzzing that edge? I'm going to come where the white meets the black. I'm not going to come over in here because I don't want it where the black isn't. Okay. So I'm here. You see how I'm fuzzing? And just fuzz, fuzz, fuzz. This area here is not fuzzed because this part of the body is above the wing. But here is fuzzed because the wing has the black and the white. So come in. Again, this brush is, let me get my hand out of your way. This brush is dry. Okay? And you see what I'm doing? I'm just fuzzing. Hey, Deb. Okay. And here. I hope when you all finish your piece, you send it to me. Because you know I love seeing your pieces. Makes me smile. Makes my night so happy. Okay. So we're here. And we're here. And I'm fuzzing the body. Now just keep in mind I have a couple second delay. So if I'm off camera, I do keep looking, but sometimes I don't notice it right away because you're behind me just a wee bit. And I have a nice little fuzzy edge. After you're fuzzed, we're fuzzed here, we're fuzzed here, around the wing, and here. Then you can wash your brushes. Don't get them wet until that point. Okay? If anybody has any questions, just ask. I'm happy to answer you. Just keeps me talking more. Just saying. Okay. Now, after class, wash your brushes. And just a FYI, I use Murphy's oil soap. And what I do is I put it in my hand and I rub my brushes just like this on the side. All of my brushes. And here, except for stencil brushes. And here. And you'll see the paint bubbling up on your brush. Pull it out. Rinse, repeat until you see just clear water. Pull all the water out of your bristles. Dry it flat. In the morning, you can dry it straight up. But until it's dry, don't, because the moisture will go down into the ferrule. It'll loosen the glue, and your brush will be no good. Don't clean your brushes like this. You'll ruin your brushes. There's my little 2-second lecture. Okay. And as long as you rinse them now, you'll be okay for till after class. Okay, so that's fine. All right, now we're going to float. We're going to float a bit of Moody blue. Now, I'll also tell you why I chose the color. I chose blue to tie in with the background, but blue is a cool color on the color wheel, so it denotes cold. So we want cold. Now, you can see how much paint I'm putting out. I'm not going to use a quarter of that. Okay? You need tiny, tiny bits of paint. All right. I'm going to teach you how to float. Now, let me just say something about floating. Floating is a technique that I love. It takes practice. So take your time and don't be hard on yourself. Don't give up, but don't be hard on yourself. Okay? I use scrap paper when I blend. I do not use palette paper. So 4 steps of floating. Wet, blot, load. Oh, that's a bad spelling, huh? Blend. Then when we float, all the bristles on all the surface all the time. Okay? These steps are really, really super important. Okay? So the 4 steps of floating is wet, blot, load, blend. When you're on your surface, it's all the bristles on all the surface all the time. I tell my students to say the steps as you're doing them. Wet, blot, load, blend, until it becomes a habit. So, when you wet, you're going to go into the water and you're going to see, here's your bristles, here's your ferrule, here's your handle. On your bristles, you'll see a shine from the water. Wet. Blot. You're going to blot perfectly flat. You're going to watch the shine dissipate. So as it goes from the chisel edge of the bristles to the ferrule, as soon as it hits the ferrule, lift. And I tell you that because every brush is different. So depending on the brush you're using. I use chisel blenders. They have a shorter length of bristles. Okay, so look at the difference. You see that? This is a chisel blender. It's shorter than a regular bristle shader. It's easier to control when it's shorter. Okay. Wet. Blot. Corner load. When you corner load, your brush is this way. Try not to be on an angle. Try to be as perpendicular as you can. So we pick up just a little bit on the corner. Let me catch up and make sure you can see that. There's just a tiny bit there. Okay? So we wet, we blot, we load, and then we blend. When we blend, I blend on scrap paper, very short strokes. And all I'm looking for is a graduation of color. So, if I start here, it's all one color. Now watch. As I blend, I'm not doing this. You pull too much moisture out of your brush. Oh, there's my paint. Little tiny strokes until you have a graduation of color. Once you have a graduation of color, so now we wet, we blot, we load, we blend. Hi, Colleen. Wet, blot, load, blend. Then remember number 2. All the bristles on all the surface all the time. So I'm going to come and I'm going to float the bottom of his body. My brush is perfectly flat. All the bristles are on all the surface. If you have to go in and do it again, come from here and try to do it in one stroke. Okay. Now, I want to explain something. When you do color, dark makes the item recede, light brings it towards us. So, if you pay attention to where your color, what you're using your color for, it'll help you where your color goes. So, I want to make my body dimensional. So I want it to look like this side is further back than this side. Okay? So I'm floating towards where I'm pushing down. So I'm pushing down the belly. FYI, if you get paint where you don't want it, if you get it off right away, just take a damp Q-tip and it'll come right off. Okay. So you can see that I push this down. The paint part of my brush is towards where I'm pushing down. It's not this way because then I'd have a line here and it would be graduating here. So always think about the area you're pushing down or you're pulling up. Okay? Hopefully that makes sense. Because I can't ask you. Well, I can, and if somebody doesn't understand that, please tell me. Okay, because I will repeat it. I just want to make this just a wee bit wider. Okay, I'm coming from the wing, and you see I'm doing it in all one stroke. If you need to soften, take your mop and very lightly just soften. You're not pulling, you're not squishing, you're very, very light, just softening. Literally, I'm just touching the surface. Okay? Okay. Now, again, and I'll say all night, light brings the element closer to us, dark makes it recede. The more I say it, the more it goes into your head. And I am sure you will hear my voice in your sleep tonight. Not such a bad thing. Just saying. Okay. We need a little bit of slate gray. Just a tiny bit. Now, let me just go back here for a second and show you. Look at how much blue I have left. I have a lot of blue left. Remember I told you we need tiny bits of paint? We need tiny bits of paint. It doesn't take much. Okay? Which is good because mine's not coming out. Okay. Now we want to highlight. We want to bring some of the area closer to us. So this wing is on top of the body. So we want to pull that wing up off the body. So, again, wet, blot, load, blend. Small strokes. And we're going to, with the paint towards the top of the wing, we're going to separate. Now, I think I haven't painted all day, huh? But I did. I'm going to also pull this up, but if I come in now and I float here, as soon as I hit this because it's wet, I'm going to pull it off. So I'm going to walk away from it and just work on another area. It's just easier to do that. So, again, I'm going to wet, blot, load, blend. I want to pull up the top of the head. So on here. And if you're not bright enough, you could do it twice. If you want to wait for it to dry, that's fine. Just make sure that you're hitting the edge, because you don't want a black line there, and that your paint is graduating. Okay? And you see how the top of my head now looks like it's coming a little bit forward? Every time you go to float, until you get used to your brush, rinse your brush and start every step again. Wet, blot, load, blend. I'm going to pull up this edge of the wing. Make sure you're hitting the edge. Okay. Now, I don't usually mop this much. When you have a very dark base, which in this case is as dark as you can go, this is black, and you have a light value that you're putting on top, it's a big jump. So you have to be really careful that it's not too heavy. Emily, are you asking me what color we're floating the penguin with? If you are, it's slate gray. We floated the body here with Moody blue, and we're slate gray here. Now, hi Kathy. So now I have to look if my float's dry, because I want to pull up this side of the wing too. Now, FYI, you'll see you have graphite. Leave it there, but after you're done painting, it'll erase right off. See that? I can erase graphite just like that, and you'll never know it was there. So if you hold it on a little bit of an angle, if there's a shine, it's still wet. If there's no shine, it's not wet. Thank you, Jessica. Thank you so much. I'm truly blessed. I'm blessed that you're all here. Alright, so now I'm going to float with the paint towards the outside of the wing, but I'm on the wing because I'm pulling the wing up. Okay, So now you see how I took a black wing, I floated some gray, and now this wing is definitely on top. Do you see that? His head comes up a little, and this side of the wing flaps up just a little, so instead of being flat like this, it's like this. So this is up, but you can see this is still behind the body. Okay? Does that make sense? Hopefully. I know I have nobody to talk to. Okay. At the end of this class, I will show you next month's class too. Okay, burnt orange. If I'm moving too fast, just tell me, because I feel like I am. So if I'm going too fast, just tell me. So you need a little bit of burnt orange. And just FYI, I know paint's really hard to come by because the paint companies have been they haven't been able to produce as much because of restrictions. If you don't have the exact colors I asked for, think about when we base coat in our medium value, then we'll shade in a darker value, and we'll highlight in a lighter value. So here's your color. Think of a darker yellow or orange and a lighter yellow, or you could go to white. So you can always sub your colors. Don't ever worry about that. Okay, so now we're going to come in and we're going to float the top of the beak. So I'm going to go from the back of, make sure I'm on the screen, from the back of the beak. Oh, don't be too wide on your brush. And it's a little area, and people tend to take their brush and go like this. But when I float, if I'm flat, let me do this in black so you can see it. If I float and keep my brush flat, I have a graduation of color. If I lift the side of my brush, I have a line of color. All right? And that makes a difference. So always keep your brush flat. Now remember, even here, I only have this little tiny bit of paint. So my paint is only going to be here. All the rest that falls here is water. All right, so it's all in how you load your brush. Okay, that has got to dry. So we're still in burnt orange. And I want to push my feet under the body because they're coming from the body. So I'm going right up against the body, but I'm on the feet. My brush is totally flat. It's going to look a little strange for a minute, but we'll get there. And I'm here. I know I'm upside down at times, and I'm sorry, but if I don't, my hand is in your way. Okay. And just so you know, these videos stay up on the library website. Go on to the library, not website, Facebook page. Go on, hit the live tab, and scroll down. They are there. I don't know how long they're there, but I know the ones I did months ago is still there. All right. Now I have a little bit of orange that bled over. So I'm just going to take a damp Q-tip. I'm just going to pull it off. Now I use Q-tips from the dollar store because they have very little cotton on it, and that's what you kind of want. You can use pressure. Hi Diana, it's fine to be late. It's fine, there's still so much to learn. We're just glad you're here. Alright, so we're going to let this dry for a minute, and while that's drying, we're going to shade the back of the beak. The back of the beak. is here. I know I'm totally upside down. But you see how I'm flat? So I'm still graduating. My color is graduating. Okay. Now, I want to show you something. If I could find my pen. Okay. So, here's my foot. It's a sad looking foot, huh? I'm going to do two of them. Oops, I don't want to do that. I'm going to do very little. Now, I want to have this toe on top. So I'm going to float here on this side, because remember we're pushing down, and I'm going to float here on this side, and that will give me my separations. If I didn't want it that way, and I wanted each toe on top the other way, I would come in here, I would float here, and I would come in here, and I would float here. So it's just a different look. So it doesn't matter which way you float. What matters is that it's in the right place. So this is on the bottom element in the shape of the top, because the top you would see the whole edge. Okay, so that's really important. So it's just a matter of where you shade. In this, neither of them are wrong. They're both fine. I want the center toe on top. So putting the center toe on top, I'm going to come in and I'm going to float on the bottom toe. Remember what I said? On the bottom toe in the shape of the top toe. It doesn't go all the way to the body. And then the same thing here. So you see how now I have this toe on top of these toes. My paint is, excuse me, my paint is towards the toe I'm pulling up and towards the toe I'm pulling up. Same thing here. I start at the bottom and I pull up and I'll flip. I always pull towards me, so I turn my surface. Turn your surface so that your hand is comfortable. Don't try to finagle your hand so that the surface is comfortable. You don't want to do that. You want your hand to be comfortable. Okay? So that's why I flip all over the place. I want to take my beak and I want to have a top beak and a bottom beak, so where his mouth would open, I'll come in. I want the top beak to be a full beak. I I never go straight. If you go straight, to me, I'm not saying it's wrong, but to me it's like you're separating it in half. So I'll scoop down a little bit so that the top beak is just a little bit bigger, and that gives me a more natural beak as opposed to a dividing line down the middle. Okay. Does anybody have any questions? I can answer them. Okay, so now my toes. I just want to push the tips down just a bit. Now this float is just a little bit different in that instead of coming up and down, we're going to come right across the tip. So we're side to side. Here, and I'm just on the tip so that the toe is pushing down. Now, there's a reason for everything I do. Anybody you paint with, there's a reason that things are the way they are. The reason for the dark is to push down. The reason for the light is to pull it up. The reason for the direction the float goes is for the dimension. So there is a reason for everything. So I'm pushing the tips of the toes down. Okay. So on our penguin so far, we came in and we fuzzed the edge of the body. This is the skin of the penguin. We fuzzed the black with a deer foot. We highlighted where we wanted to pull up. So we pulled up the edge of this wing. We pulled up both edges of this wing in slate gray and the top of the head to give it more dimension. We floated the belly here to cool him off and to give him dimension. We came from the wing, so we separated the body from the wing because that had to be separated. If we didn't want to come to here, we could put a little gray on this side and separate that way. And then we came in and we floated the beak and the separation. We floated the back of the feet, the toes, and the tips. Okay, so that's what we've done so far. Okay. Now, this is our beginner class, so I'm going through every single technique. I am more than happy to repeat myself. And we have time, so don't think you're going to hold me up. All right. So, sunny day and warm white. You need a teeny tiny bit. We're just going to dry brush some. I'm going to use a very small dry brush because, oh, I have some white. Okay. I'm going to use a small dry brush. Now, I'm going to use a sable dry brush. There are different types of dry brushes. These I like because they are nice and soft. They're sable, faux sable hair, and they're super soft. Another one that you could use is a white bristle, which looks like this. It's just a little harsher, but it's still got the round bristles. You can also use a stencil brush. I use stencil brushes a lot. Okay, so in this case, I'm going to pick up some yellow on my brush, and then I'm going to pick up some white because I want to lighten it. I'm going to, my brush just rolled right through my beads. Okay, so I'm going to take my paper towel. Now make sure you're not on the wet area of the paper towel because this brush is dry. Excuse me, it's dry. And I'm just going to pull paint off. I just want a scant amount of paint on there. If you're using a stencil brush or a white bristle brush, you can scrub. And then I'm going to come in and I want to highlight. So if you're using a sable brush, again on the side, if you're using a white bristle or a stencil brush, you can be up and down. They're used differently. And I'm just going to very lightly and in a small area in the center, I'm going to highlight. You see how let me make sure that I'm on screen. You see how I just changed that whole beak? Make sure I'm on screen. Oh, good job. Okay. I'm also going to add a little highlight to each toe. Okay? So this is why I say nice small brush, because we're in a nice small area. We'll use a little bit of a bigger brush and I'll use a stencil brush when we get to the shamrocks so that you can see how I use a stencil brush. And you can see just this little bit of highlight gives us a lot more dimension. You see that? Okay. And then you can clean your brush. Oh, let's take our liner. Let's finish our penguin. I'm going to take our liner. Now, when you use a liner, you're going to come in and you're going to go from the water. Now, this is how I do it. I'm going to go in the water. I'm going to blot just a quick blot so that I don't have a puddle of water. I'm going to pull a little bit from the side of my paint puddle. I'm not putting it in and twisting it like this. If you're doing that, what you're going to do is you're going to break the hairs at the ferrule here. If you want to twist, pull some, twist, pull some, twist, pull some, twist, okay? When you use a liner, you use very little pressure and straight up and down. So your brush, you're right on the very tip, and you'll have a nice thin line. If you sit the brush back in your hand, you're going to have a much thicker line. Okay, so think straight up and down. Okay, so wet, blot quick, pull some paint, and you'll get used to lifting and twisting. It'll just become a second nature. You'll come in, I'm straight up and down, and I'm going to line, oops, I had some paint on there, would help. I'm going to line my eye. Should put my glasses on, huh? Line my eye. And you see how nice and thin I am? I like it nice and thin. When you do eyelashes, that's bad, huh? I guess I'm not wearing glasses. Okay. And then I'm going to line my pupil. Okay. Now, if I were to do eyelashes, it makes a difference that you're up, because you want them to be super thin. You see the difference? Okay. You're going to fill in your eye with black. You can do that with your liner. You can do that with a very small flat. I'm going to do it with a rigger. I'm just going to come in, and I'm just going to fill it in. Not much to that eye. Well, he's a cute penguin, isn't he? That is true, Rosalie. Always better late than never. I agree. Okay. I have a nice straight hair on my brush. I know you can't see it. You need, ready? We're going to do some shamrocks. Midnight green. We need midnight green. Midnight green is one of my go-to colors. I know I'm talking down, sorry. Okay. If you don't have midnight green, just take a darker green. Now, when you have the base of something, in this case, you have shamrocks. Clovers have 4 leaves, shamrocks have 3. When you have the base of anything, your paint is side to side. You're not going to come down this side and down this side. First of all, you'll pull this side off, and second of all, you'll look like you're lining it. You won't look like it's pushing into each other. In a shamrock, they all meet in the middle. Okay? So, okay. So, if I did down this side and then up this side, that's what it looks like. It does not have the depth. If I come down a little just to get my bearings, and then I go across. So you see how my paint is towards the bottom. And you see the difference in the depth from here to here? That makes a difference. I get my bearings here, and I'm side to side. Okay? I'm not down one side and up one side. And that's with anything that you're pushing down like that. So if you're doing leaves, if you're doing petals, if you're doing whatever you're doing. In a shamrock, they are leaves. Okay? So I'm going to come in, and they're going to meet. So I'm going to start. I'm coming, getting my bearings, remember? And then I'm side to side. It curves up a little. Okay, I'm going to do all my centers, my center leaves first. Does that matter? No. It just gives me a point that I work from. Okay. And here. And I'm not coming down to here because this has to have a middle point too. And I'm side to side. This is a real good lesson in depth because you're going side to side, and most people don't. Oh, there's a lot of shine on there, isn't there? Sorry about that. Most people don't realize that that the depth is created by how you put it in. Coming down one side and up the other side is not going to give you the same depth. So see how I'm side to side? So now I'm going to come in, and remember what I said, shamrock leaves meet in the middle. So I'm going to do the same thing here. Think of this as a little runway, and then I'm side to side. See that? Whoops. Now, if you have a little bit off, just take the clean end of your brush and just pull it off. I'll come in. And I kind of just keep my brush in this. Now, all of these, the paint on the brush is towards the center of the shamrock. I'm softening tonight a lot. Okay. So, in here. And of course, you can all come to the intermediate classes, but I don't do technique like I do here. Like I won't go over floating, and I won't go over liner usage and things like that. And we are online for classes because of the pandemic. I do not know when that will change, but it will change once we're back in person. You'll all have to miss me. I don't know, you'll all say, I'm so glad to be rid of her. Okay. And I'm side to side. And you see how I just created my 3 leaves? I know I'm totally upside down. See how I just created my 3 leaves? And then my stem will come out of here, and it'll come right out of the center. So you see how we have dimension here, and I don't have it here yet? Okay. So I'll come here, and I'll finish these 2. Whoops. And I'll come here, the runway, and then I'm side to side, scooping just a little bit. Nothing is ever well, most things are not perfectly straight. Sometimes they are. There are exceptions to that rule. Not a lot, but there are. Okay, and here. And away. Okay. Now I have beautiful shamrocks, don't I? Look at those shamrocks. So what I did is I took flat green shamrocks and I pushed them down at the base. So now they have a center because they're pushing down. Is there more to pull them up? Of course. Isn't there always? Okay, so now nobody's struggling with that, right? And I'm not going anywhere. You can come up on my Facebook. I'll hang with you all, okay? I'll keep you busy. This is one good thing that I have to say that has come out of the pandemic, is that we've all kind of pulled together. And while I have been teaching this class for 25 years, some of you never even knew. So that's a good thing. Okay. So now I'm going to dry brush with a stencil brush and show you how to use a stencil brush. Stencil Pro is my favorite stencil brush because it's very soft, but it's firm enough to do what I want it to do. This brush is also synthetic, so it can be cleaned with hand sanitizer. It can be cleaned on a baby wipe and used again because it would still be dry. Okay? So, Marie, you're not going away from me. I'm going to pick up Olive. See how I picked it up on the whole brush? And I'm going to take, again, stay on the dry paper towel. Now this is different. I'm not on the side. I'm scrubbing. See that? I'm using the paper towel. I'm scrubbing on my paper towel. I use shop towels till there's a scant amount of paint on there. If you have a lot of paint, when you dry brush, what's going to happen is you're going to get a blob of paint. You don't want a blob of paint. I'm going to dry brush straight up and down in little circles. I'm going to dry brush in the center of each leaf. Now, see the difference between this leaf, these leaves, and this one? I know, Bev, isn't it? It's because we miss you all. So, see the difference in the dimension? So, now I've pushed these down. Here's my base coat color, but I've brought the center of it up. So now they're not flat. Now, they're dimensional. See the difference? And there's a lot of different techniques, but it doesn't take a lot to create that dimension. Okay. And I'm here. And I'm here. And I'm here. It's okay that I went a little bit into the shaded areas. That's not a problem. What you don't want is you don't want that. You see that big blob? That's because I didn't pull the paint off. What you want, and you can scrub the bejeebies out of this brush, is a nice, light, airy. So you see the difference? You want a nice, light, airy dry brush. If I want it to be brighter, I'll just do it again and again. I don't want a blob of paint. Okay? That's the big thing that people hate dry brushing, because they end up with a blob of paint. You don't want that. No, olive green, Patty. Colleen, I have to tell you something. Everybody says things about my accent. I say I don't have an accent. It'll only be library classes. I'll still be on my Facebook. And maybe I'll commit to at least one a month. Keep you all busy. Gotta make sure those brushes are moving. Okay. So, I have to disguise my accent though. When we created dimension, we shaded the dark area. So shading is floating with a darker value than your base coat. Highlighting is floating with a lighter value than your base coat. It could also be a dry brush. So shading is darker than your base coat. Highlighting is lighter than your base coat, whatever technique you're using. In this case, we shaded with a float and we highlighted with a dry brush. Okay. So, lost all your comments. Oh, there you go. You're welcome. We used, Patty, we used Sunny Day tipped in white for the highlight on his feet and his beaks. His beak. He has one beak. After we're done, because we're moving along very well, I'll go through every technique with you. All right. Now, his stems. And then I think I'll show you something else. You need plantation pine and you need olive. And you already have olive out. Now I used plantation pine because it's darker than our shamrocks, which the stem is dark, is always darker, but I don't want it to be as dark as my shading. You're welcome. Okay, I'm going to use a rigger. I love my rigger. Years ago they were very expensive. Now they are very inexpensive. They're $5 or $6 brushes. And you can use them for so many things. You can see mine is well used. All right, so a rigger is a flat brush and a round ferrule, really. It can be used as a round brush, it can be used as a liner, it can be used as a flat brush, and it can be used, all of them, in the same stroke, which is what I love. So, if I take the brush as is, I can paint in a round, with a round brush. So this could be my round brush. It's a little bit back in my hand. I can paint his wings because it's a round brush. Okay. I can paint swirls. Okay, let me do this. I can use it as a liner on the very tip, straight up and down. Okay, so I could tilt it back, paint an eye, straight up and down, paint eyelashes. Now, I can take this brush, pull my paint, pressure, so think of 1 as this, 10 as an L, like if I really put pressure. Bev, they're Mondays. There's one Monday a month. I think it's, okay, so the beginner class is March 18th. It's that Monday is the intermediate class. And I'll show you that. So I pull paint, a pressure of about an 8. So I'm good pressure and I'm wiggling. See how I'm wiggling? And what I did is I just created a flat brush. Can you see that? So with that flat brush, I can now base coat. I can letter, pressure. Now I'm up to a round brush, pressure. Okay. So see how I can do all of that? I can make a ribbon. Pressure, flat, up to a round, pressure to a flat, up to a round, pressure to a flat, up to a round. And I can do that all in one stroke. I can make a branch and go up. I can give little branches, and I can do all of that with one brush. You can't do that with a lot of brushes. Of course, please don't make your branches unclean. Okay, so it really is a fabulous brush. So, okay, so wait a second. Let me go back. Christy, I'm glad. Thank you. Patty, are your shamrocks too light? If they are too light, the answer to that is take your leaf green, thin it down a lot, and take your shader, your flat brush, and with a very thin coat, just go right over it. It'll tone it down, but it'll still keep your highlight there. Okay? So, now I'll come in and I'm flattening my rigger. Now, if you don't have a rigger, you can use a flat brush. If you're comfortable with a round brush, use a round brush. I'm just telling you what I use. Okay? And if you paint with me, I want you to have one. Because I can say that. I'll probably get in trouble. And I'm just going to stroke my stem. Okay? Now, if you put your stems in, your lines, use that as a guide. It doesn't matter if you still see it. It doesn't matter if the lines are still there, because you'll come in and erase it. It's no big deal. See, now this, if you look, is in the wrong spot. Okay, so I probably ended up, when I was shading, I moved my center. So if I did my stem here, it wouldn't make any sense. So I'll come in and I'll fix that. I'll come from here. I've got pressure. And I'm here. Just make sure here it's one stem, so it meets. And then I'll come from here. Okay. Now this is going to need a set, and I did this here so that it's in his hand. Let me just dry this for a second. Now, if anybody has any questions, just ask. I'm going to quickly dry this, and I'm going to put a second coat on. Patty, if it doesn't work, just tell me, and we can dry brush over it also. But that's the easiest way to fix it. Your base coat color is your best friend whenever you're doing anything. If you get too bright, wash over it or dry brush over it with your base coat color. If you get too dark, do the same thing. Okay? You will not lose what you did in that case. Good. Okay. Yeah, it's usually an easy fix like that, because if you're washing, you won't lose all the work you did. Okay. So we'll come in and I'll put another coat. Now, when I put my second coat, I want it to be wet as I'm working. I'm going to come in while it's wet, so I'm going to work one stem at a time. I'm going to wipe a little. I'm going to pick up some olive on the same brush. I'm not cleaning. I'm just going to come in. I'm going to drag some olive in the middle. I can still see the color underneath, and I'm not going from here to here. Okay? I just want to put a highlight in the center of the stem. I'll put a little highlight here. Okay? Then I'll come in. I'll go back to my Plantation pine. I'll come here. And here. Oops. And I'll just drag a little bit in. Now, if I get this line here, I wipe off my brush, And I'll just come in and remember what I said. Go back to your base because I got too light here. Oh, still too light. If you're still too light, clean off your brush. And fix it. There you go. Okay. Third one. I need more Plantation time. Okay. So we'll come in and I'll flatten again. And I'll do another coat. And then I'll show you. I'll wipe. And all I'm doing is wiping on a paper towel. I'm picking up olive. I'm just going to come and I'm going to swipe some olive in there. Okay. Now that should create your natural shading. Okay. So you see down here is already dark. I don't need to darken it. However, if you went too far, so if you pulled your light too far, and this should probably come down just a little bit more because it's too dark in here. So I'll just bring a little bit more. But it's still dark where it goes under the arm because, remember what I said, dark makes the item recede, light brings it up. So if I'm light here, it's coming up. It's not going under the wing. Okay? Now, if you lost that, let me just get this out. Okay. If you lost that and it got too light, you'll take your float, you'll go back to the Midnight Green. Now, people stress this float, which is why I never put it in my beginner class, because it's a real small float. But again, remember what I said, it's side to side. You can push your stem down. So here, where I'm going into under the shamrock, watch the difference. I'm going to come right here, and it's a little float. But you see how now it looks like it's pushing under the shamrock? See the difference between here and here? And I'll do the same thing over here. Whoops. You know, it sounds like I'm killing my brush, but I promise you I'm not. And I'll do the same thing here and push it underneath. Okay? If, and I'm okay, but if I was too light here, I would do the same thing. I would just separate. Okay? I'll push some there. Okay, so you see how I push that down? Beautiful, right? Okay. Now, let me just do a recap while this is drying. And then I'm going to show you the bottom. I'll show you next month's class. And then I'll show you what I would do to pull it all together. And I wasn't sure on time, so I never do that. We took our penguin. We floated Moody Blue here. Remember, floating is wet, blot, load, blend. We highlighted with a float the top of the wing and the bottom of the wing to pull it up off the body, top of the head, top edge of this wing. We floated the beak, the top of the beak, the back of the beak, and the separation of the two edges of the beak. The back of the feet where it pushes into the penguin, separations of the toe, and the tips of the toe. We came in, we floated side to side in Midnight Green each leaf of the shamrock. We dry brushed the center of the shamrock. And we stroke the stem. This is olive green. We stroke the stem with a rigger in Plantation Pine, and then we dragged some olive green into it so we have dimension. All right. Now, a step that is not on my original, but I do, because you'll see the difference. I'm going to take Deep Midnight Blue, which is where we're going to make our iceberg here. And we're going to float. Now, if you want to pull your edges, kind of pull it together so it's not so plain, you can use your 14 chisel blender or your 12. I'm going to use a bigger brush. Maybe. And I'm going to do the same thing. Wet, blot. I just want a wider float. Corner load and blend. And blend it out. So here, because it's bigger, I'm wider. But I'm still blending till I have a graduation. And I'm going to float the edge of the surface. Oops. Now if it's too dry like this, just add water to the same brush and blot it. You don't need to. You see how pretty that looks? And because remember what I said, if I come here, I'm going to pull this whole edge off. So I'm going to come and I'm going to do this side. Now, is this a necessary step? No. Is it a beautiful step? Yeah. And you'll see after, oh, that's a mess. That's me. Let me just draw it so that I can do the top and the bottom, and we'll do the iceberg. And I'll show you when you put, what a mess, the iceberg in. I do it very easily with the last of my dry brushes. So I used a sable dry brush to dry brush here for nice soft. I used a Stencil Pro to dry brush here a little bit differently. And I'm going to use a Mezza Luna to dry brush down here. Those are the 3 dry brushes I use. Okay. Now, remember what I said, if you look at it on an angle and you see a shine, then that's, that means it's still wet. Okay. Now, I'll come in. Same thing, wet, blot, load, blend. And I'll come in and I'll float along the top. Oops. I'm up because I'm going very quickly. And I'll do the bottom. And I'll come here. And you'll see it just gives it another element of dimension. So you see, let me just wait until it comes up and I can see. Okay, I'm going to do it this way. You see how I have that element of dimension there? When I take that and I do it this way, this is fine. It's just, it doesn't have the same dimension because I haven't done the edges. Is it wrong? Absolutely not. Just a little, it does make a huge difference, right? So that's just the difference. Okay? Now, remember I told you you can erase graphite. So you can come in with your eraser and look, just comes right off. Okay? You also, here's a neat little tip of the day. You can use terpenoid, not turpentine, odorless terpenoid. So I often just put it on a paper towel a little bit, rub the whole piece. I do that all the time. It'll take any graphite off that has no paint on top of it. And then I varnish so you don't have to see it. Okay, so you can, either way. You can use an eraser, you can use Turpenoid. Turpenoid you can get at Michael's or Hobby Lobby or any of those places. Okay, Mezza Luna. Again, dry brush. It's a different kind of dry brush though, because you can clean it in water, pinch it dry, and use it again. You know? So I'm going to pick up some blue. I have blue on my brush. I'm just going to pinch some off. What heck? Yucky. Okay? And I'm just going to drag my paint back and forth like this. My brush is flat. I want to just create some dark areas here. Definitely where his feet are. Where his body is. Because that's the darkest area. Try not to go up and down, but sometimes you just gotta get that in there. And I'm back and forth. Okay? I just keep picking up and pinching. Let me see what I'm doing. It's okay to have dark areas like this. Not a problem. And here. You don't always use this brush like this, but in this case, it's exactly what I'm doing. Load, pinch. There's another scrubbing brush. Now, can you leave it like this? Of course you can leave it like this, because he's on his iceberg. Let me just get a little bit more blue. And this is dry, because you're using a dry brush. You're using very little bit of paint, because you're pinching it off. So I'm loading, and I'm pinching. And you see how I'm building up my color? I didn't come in and try to do it all in one coat. I just come. There's some darker areas, there's some lighter areas. And he's beautiful, right? Okay, now, I'm a glitter person. No doubt about it. So I'm going to put some glitter on. Now, just have wax paper or paper, and I'll show you why in a second. Now you can use varnish. I use Glamour Dust Liquid and Glamour Dust Ultrafine Crystal Glitter, which is white. I'm just going to take some glitter, some glitter paint. I'm just going to take my brush. I'm just going to pick it up. I'm just going to go back and forth. This has to be wet for the glitter to stick. And like I said, you can do it with varnish. You just have to go fast enough so that it's still wet. Or do half and half. I find it harder to do half and half because then you get that line. Okay, so here. And I'm pulling horizontally. There is glitter in that. Make sure it's wet. Which for some reason mine's drying quick. You're going to take your ultrafine glitter and you're just going to pour it on. Okay? You're going to bang. And you have a nice glittered iceberg. And what you're going to do is you're going to open your cap. Make sure you can see. Open your cap. Take your paper or your wax paper, bend it, and just put all the extra right back in. Okay? So now you're wasting nothing. Okay? And I have a nice glittered iceberg. Do you have to glitter? No. Do I glitter? Yes. I glitter everything. You know, that's a very Linda thing. All right. Does anybody have any questions before I show you next month's class? Yes, no, maybe so. All right. Oh, we're 10 minutes over. All right, so Thursday, March 18th. this will be our piece. Let's see if I can get the whole thing in. This piece, okay, Liz, do I glitter before I varnish? No, usually I varnish first, but because I can varnish from here up, I do not varnish over glitter. It gets very clumpy. Here's a tip that most people won't tell you, but I'll tell you. If you don't want the varnish to come off like that, hit it with a little bit of hairspray. I have a can of Aquanet in my studio, and you just spray it with hairspray quickly, and it'll keep the glitter on. Let me quickly, Emily, and then I'll show you the pieces. Emily just wants to do the eye again. So you take your liner, you line your eye, you line your pupil, then I take a rigger or a flat brush, in this case I'm bigger, and you just fill in your pupil. Nice thin coat. Okay. So on the 18th, this piece I bought at Dollar Tree. People are saying they're having a hard time getting it. You need to base coat your letters. I don't care what color you use, just have a darker color to shade with. If you have a hard time getting it, the line drawing will be on my Facebook just up until the day of class, 2 weeks before class. Put it on another piece. Take a piece of wood and trace it on. You know, I showed you how to do with graphite, so do that. I'm so glad you did. And then my intermediate class, because I already showed them, so 18, 17, 16. On the 15th, this is my class for the 15th. Okay, we're going to work on wood grain. We're going to work on eggs and decorations and things like that. Keep in mind, this one I'll go through floating. We're going to stipple, and we're going to do, you know, we're going to learn how to do this texture and such. This I will not go through floating. I'll go through wood grain, and I'll go through, you know, how we do our decorations, and we're going to put modeling paste on his little fluffy tail, which you can do, you don't have to do. Just keep in mind, this I don't do technique. This one I will do technique. Next month they're both in the same week. Okay, so I think that's everything. If nobody has any questions, yes, it's a bunny butt. I agree. Thank you. So I'll flip myself around because that's the only way I can turn you off. Now you can all see my messy studio. Flip. Ah, there you go. We'll be hearing your non-accent tonight in my dreams. I always say, people hear my voice in their sleep because I say the same thing over and over and over again. And yes, I have a very typical New York accent. I would be lost without my accent. It kind of defines me. That and my magic hands. And my tiara. I'll wear a tiara next time. All right, girls. So I'm out. I will see you all before Easter. I just show the bunny butt again because I want a screenshot. I will send you a picture. You're very welcome. I thank you all for being here. If anybody has any comments, please type them here and I will answer them. And, oh, Agnes, you're very welcome. Thank you for being here. Linda, thank you for being here. Oh, Kathy, I didn't know you were here. Thank you. So if you've painted tonight, please put your pictures up. I love seeing them. If you get stuck on a piece, just pop in and ask me and I'll help you. All right? So I have to tell you, Liz, you just made my whole day. All right, I'm out of here before, you know, I'm laughing too much. All right, good night all. Thank you all so much for being here.